Hey everybody, we're live. Welcome. My name is Aaron Eden and I am going to be your host today. I know that many of you have been dealing with this crazy coronavirus stuff, COVID-19. We all went through this process of shutting down our businesses, putting them on pause, working from home, whatever was right for our businesses. Many of you applied for or got loans from the Paycheck Protection Program or maybe other sources. And you're now left sitting in the situation of, okay, great. We're looking at potentially opening back up slowly and those kinds of things. What do I do? I've got to get my employees rolling again. Maybe I've got employees that are receiving payments on unemployment, and trying to negotiate. How do I balance all of those things as a business leader? And so those are the topics we're going to tackle here today. Thank you for joining us. You'll notice that in the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there's a little link there that says polls, and there's 3 polls that are in there. I would love it if you would please go in there and answer those questions. That will help Ellen, Tim, and Chris to better understand where our audience is at and what sort of help you're looking for, and try to make this as valuable as possible for all of you. So in the chat on the right, thank you for all of you that have been introducing yourselves and having some good conversation. Please do. We can all help each other through all of this. Feel free to use that chat. We'll monitor that throughout. And maybe as I'm introducing the panelists, you can use clapping. You can actually clap for your panelists right there in the chat, however you want. Get them excited since they can't hear you. And it's really hard to do this kind of thing without being able to hear your audience yelling and cheering for you. So in no particular order, Chris Galley, our Chief People Officer from Couchbase. Chris basically handles everything with regard to Couchbase's people strategy and culture, probably for better or for worse. He has probably more than 20 years experience in both enterprises and startups all over the place. And many of those have been deemed the best places to work. And that's as a result of driving deep levels of employee engagement and really, creating a culture where employees love coming to work and do give their best every single day. So let's give Chris a big Army hooah and welcome him to our panel. Thanks for joining us, Chris. Got the big thumbs up. Awesome. Chris, softball question. What did you have for breakfast today?
What didn't I have for breakfast? This has been a rolling breakfast today. Yogurt, fruit, smoothies. All this work from home makes me hungry. They call it the COVID-15. I'm working on 14 right now, trying not to
15 pounds from COVID.
Yeah, try not to eclipse the 15.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate you jumping in on such short notice.
Great to be here.
Let's jump over to Ellen. So Ellen's the director.
Sorry,
go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to know that I also serve on the local workforce board out here in the Bay Area. And I grew up in a small business. My family owned a corner pharmacy in New Orleans, Louisiana, back in the day. So I'm very interested in learning just as much as sharing.
Perfect. Thanks for the additional context. I'm going to jump over to Ellen. So Ellen is the director of the MAC Small Business Development Center here in Tucson. And she's got a ton of experience in sales and finance after 35 years in banking. And her last role was as a senior vice president of the small business division at Chase. Most of her career has been on working with small businesses. And like Chris, she's a small has been a small business owner. She's also a published author, and she's super active in the Tucson community. So really appreciate you joining us as well, Ellen.
Thank you.
You ready for your softball?
I saw Tim bouncing it back and forth. I'm jealous.
Yeah. What's the hardest part of working from home, Ellen?
This desk for 12 hours. So when I can take a walk, it's really nice. I did want to mention that we're at the Pima Community College SBDC. We were at MAC for some years, but we've been with Pima Community College, and they help provide funding and facilities for us. And I also mentioned the Arizona Commerce Authority. They also help fund the SBDC, and I've been pleased to be able to do some webinars there. So it's been a great opportunity to be able to talk to the business community in this way. There's been so much happening, so I think I'll cover a pretty important area as well as the rest.
Awesome. We're also getting a little bit of an echo from your side, so if you can either turn down your volume, or you may have two devices connected. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Ellen. Appreciate you joining us. Let's jump over to Tim. So I had to look this one up. It says it said on your profile that you're an AV rated attorney. And I had no idea what that meant. And I realized that is amazing and is a huge honor, and means that you are one of the most sought after attorneys probably in the world. And so really appreciate you joining us here. I learned something new just by reading your bio. So Tim defends clients in product liability, insurance claims, labor, employment disputes all over the place. He's represented a bunch of different employers in many different facets of labor and employment law. And as if that didn't keep Tim busy enough, he also counsels employers on day-to-day HR issues, and works with entrepreneurs in contract negotiations, and also serves on many local nonprofit boards. So thank you, Tim. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Aaron.
Wonderful. So your softball is, what is the best book you've ever read?
The reason why I became a lawyer in part was I read The Firm back in college, and it really inspired me to try to. Originally, I was going to get into the FBI because I just thought they can't be this incompetent. But after I became a lawyer, I decided to go into private practice. So I would say The Firm by John Grissom.
Very cool. Let's see. We got our introductions. One more reminder for the audience. There's an ask a question box down on the bottom right as well. Thank you for everybody who's filled out the polls. We can now see that just over half of our audience is a current business owner, and most of them have applied for PPP and either are figuring out what to do with it, or some of them have a clear path as to how they'd like to use it. And the majority of them, 2/3 of them, do have employees that are receiving unemployment at this point in time. So for those of you in the audience, if you've got specific questions for any of our panel, I guess, feel free to ask them in the ask a question box. And if you see one in there that you want to make sure that we cover, feel free to give it a thumbs up, and it'll move up on the list. So let's start with a little bit of context. Maybe we'll get a little dirty. What is a PPP? Sounds
okay.
like.
So, is this my part?
Sure, go for it.
Okay. The Payroll Protection Program, that's why we just say PPP, it's a mouthful, was designed specifically to help keep employees employed. And with the crisis, so many business just stopped, and employees were laid off. And so Did you want me to cover some of the updates, or did you want to wait to do that?
I think that's great. Maybe just a little bit of a little bit of a 101 for the handful of folks that that don't have a relationship with it already.
Okay.
And a couple updates would be awesome.
All right. So basically, small businesses, which it's kind of an overview position, but 500 employees or less. So I'm going to say PPP loan at first, when it was funded, was $349 billion, so $389 billion, and it went in a week and a half. And that was because a lot of the large businesses and large banks working with their big clients really raveled that up. The second wave, which we got $310 billion, has been designated more for small to medium-sized businesses, and we're seeing that happen. They actually put limits on. So I've seen more fundings in the last week than I did of all the time before that. And this all started, the funding started the first week in April, to put it in context. So now those that were in a queue, when you applied, you got a number. That's New York speaking. You got a number, and that put you in the queue with that lender. When you went through the process, if you had everything there, then at the end of the day, you've got an SBA number, and that was magic because it meant that within 10 days you would get funded. So a lot of that was not happening those first weeks. I have people that just got funded this week that put their applications in the first week. And so now the small and medium-sized banks are the only ones allowed to be handling these, and for the most part, so that's really made a big difference. So there's still dollars. The good news is it is going slower, unlike the first round, so there still is money. And you have to have an account with the bank that you're working with, and some are using electronic funds transfer. And also, I want to really reiterate that those of you who have gotten funding, and I notice a lot of notes in here that you have, please, please, please document it well. You remember how the process you had to go through to get the funds in the first place? There's going to be for forgiveness, which if you don't know what that means. So when these are used for the right reasons, for 75% for payroll, and then the other 25% can be used for mortgage interest and utilities. It all has to be documented. It's been recommended some are segregating the funds in a separate account. However you need to do it, please keep adequate records, because everything you went through to get the loan, you're going to have and more at the end. So if you can segregate those to prove what you used the money for. The second alert I would give you is you can't duplicate. So if you applied for the EIDL, the disaster loan, and there was an advance loan up to $10,000, if you got that and you're claiming payroll and it's duplicate, they're not going to allow that. So please be sure you're not duplicating with your funds. So again, when you're keeping good records, you'll find that. So those were really some of the big things. So these funds, again, just to remind you, were for paying employees. Some are paying employees even though they're not working and they can't be open. So a real quick example, I have a salon that, laid everyone off like they were told to when the city said close the doors. And then when this came along and he got the funding, he hired everyone back. And he said, well, what are they going to do? Because they can't perform services. So we talked about making videos that can help people at home take care of themselves until they can come back. So there are things that people can do.
Hey, Aaron, just to piggyback on what Ellen just said, a couple things. Joe Cromunga is on the phone with Midwest Regional Bank. Most of the banks at the beginning will require you to have a relationship with the bank before they would loan money and process your PPP application. Joel's one of the few that I've come across in town that actually will process PPP loans for non-clients. So if you're on this call and haven't applied for a PPP and are wondering who you can go to, Joel Cromunga is on the in the list, so you can email either me or him, and he'll be happy to help you. He's helped a number of our clients get loans. In fact, I just talked with one of my clients today whose money was in his account this morning, so he was tickled pink. So Joel's been awesome with respect to that. And then we are getting some guidance now on the forgiveness side. As Ellen said, it is really good and smart to create a separate bank account for the monies that you're going to be spending. And I know some of the questions that we're going to be talking about is, what if your employees were making more money on unemployment than what they were making when they're making or working for you? So that will be a topic for today's discussion. But on the payroll costs, 25%, as Ellen said, it includes either mortgage interest or rent, as well as other payroll costs like healthcare group benefits, 401k contributions, so long as it's what you as an employer are contributing, not necessarily what the employee is contributing. And obviously your utilities. So I've gotten a lot of questions on what qualifies as utilities. It is defined under the statute and the Act. But amongst other things, it includes internet access, transportation, which is undefined as to what that means. So I've been telling employers, if you have deliveries that you're making, the gas costs, that should be included. A lot of these questions, you're going to want to go back to your lender directly, because at the end of the day, the lender is going to be the one deciding whether to forgive the loan or not. There's also some dispute right now, or at least the Americans CPAs Institute is trying to push Congress and the Treasury to redefine the 8-week period. Right now, as soon as you get funded, you got 8 weeks from the date of funding to spend the money. So the CPA Association is trying to convince Congress to the Treasury to issue guidance that allows it to basically coincide with a payroll period when you actually make the pay period. So you would run 8 weeks from that. But right now, that's still undetermined. There's only been one guidance so far on loan forgiveness. And again, we'll chat about that in a minute.
Yeah, and I want to second your comment about Joel. I think I invited him to be on any of these webinars that we're doing. And he's doing a phenomenal job. And that was an issue about you not having an account. And you had to have an account as of February 15th. I had some clients that had that issue as well. So I invite him to these, and thanks for being on.
Wonderful. Chris, can we still hear you? See, your video went out, but do you still have audio?
Yeah, it seemed like we were a little light on bandwidth, so I tried to save a little.
No worries. Just want to make sure that you weren't having issues. That's all. Cool. Wonderful. So we're going to jump into a real use case. So Shannon Riggs from Pop Cycle down on 4th Avenue kindly volunteered to jump in and basically share her story with our panel. And we'll have a few minutes for her to share her story, and then a few minutes for the panel to ask questions and kind of clarify, and then discuss a bit. I think it's a good think out loud moment, and try to see if we can share some tips and tricks that might help Shannon work through the situation, and likely will be helpful to most of the other folks that are listening too. Let me see if I can pull Shannon in here real quick. Oh, there are no seats left in this. Does anybody want to volunteer to be listen only for a few minutes while we let Shannon share her story? No? All right. Chris, since you're low on bandwidth, I'm going to switch yours to listen only for just a minute. Oh, he already jumped out. Look at him. It's just like, pow. Thank you. I appreciate that. And now let's see if I can pull Shannon in. There we go. All right. And then now I pull Shannon in. Sorry, technical difficulties. Here we go. Yes, invite Shannon. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to, well, actually, I don't want to have to repeat it. So I'm going to wait a second. A whole bunch of people said, "How do I make it listen only?" Sorry, I was referring to our panel. It only lets me have four people in the video at once, and so I was trying to figure out who I could remove to make space for Shannon. And I invited her. Oh, she rejected. Maybe she changed her mind. Kidding. No, I think I saw she was on there twice, actually. Maybe, let me find the other one. Sorry, guys. Here we go. Let's try this one. Maybe that one will work. Oh, accepted and connecting. Here comes Shannon. Okay. There we go.
Hello.
Hey there. How are you? I should have pressed. I should have invited you sooner. I didn't realize that it was going to take it so long. Thank you for your willingness.
Aaron, I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not sure what's going on.
Sure can.
Let's see.
How about now?
Maybe I muted everybody. I'm not sure, Aaron. I can't hear you. I'm punching all the buttons, but I'm not sure what happened to my sound.
Chat.
Type in there. So okay.
No, we can hear you. Yeah.
You can hear me. Well, that's good, but I don't know what you're trying to ask me. So, you can type it to me. Yeah, but just type what you want to ask me, I guess. But eventually, I'm gonna have to get back to where I can hear them. Please tell us about Popcycle. What is Popcycle? Is a retail store on 4th Avenue. We specialize in handmade goods from local artists. So we have about 100 local artists, mostly on consignment. We have 9 employees, and yeah, so our focus is on sustainability, and yeah, we're not open to the public right now. Okay, what situation are we in regarding the PPP? We just sent in our application, we signed the forms yesterday. So we should be getting the money in our bank account within the next 5 days. We got the grant before that. So a question that I had is that at first the bank told me I had a certain amount for the PPP, and then it was reduced by quite a bit. And I'm not sure if that had to do with the grant that we had already gotten, if that somehow, otherwise I don't know why it got reduced. All of our employees are laid off or on half-time. So a couple of people are still working, but much less than they were before. A couple of them have gotten unemployment, but most of them being really part-timers. Most of our employees are artists in town. A lot of them are artists in the store, so they don't work full-time for us, or they're students. So a lot of them have off and on employment histories that's made it really hard for them to get unemployment. Let's see. When did you reduce hours or lay off your employees? About March 17th is the last day that we were open for a day to the public. So after that, yeah, we started reducing hours at that point. And any other questions?
Can I ask you a question? Can you hear me?
Good?
Yes.
Good.
Shannon, can you hear me? Yes. Well, I'll be glad to work with you after this. I'm the director for the Small Business Development Center. I'd kind of like to take a look at what that reduction was so you can understand it. No?
Ellen, you're going to have to type it. She can't hear.
Okay.
Sorry.
You want to take me off?
Yeah, Aaron, why don't you? It's probably going to be easier if you take her off.
Yeah.
Only because then she can hear us.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. We'll do that. We'll hit the rest. We can hit the rest via chat. Let me also pull Chris back in. So for Tim and Ellen, any additional questions that you have, please throw them in the chat for Shannon, and we can start working through it. I think she already mentioned it, but she did post. Oh, Tim already answered her question in the chat about the EIDL grant along with PPP. And then there's another question about certain time to spend the grant. So I'll let you guys drive for just a minute, and I'm going to get Chris back in.
Sure. Alan, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Well, why don't you go ahead and I can fill in. I think that there's some pretty specific guidelines.
Yeah, there definitely are. The fact that her employees are part-time employees or are freelancers, 1099s, they're eligible for unemployment under the federal stimulus through the CARES Act. So her employees should apply immediately. The good news is unemployment's retroactive to the day that this went into effect, which is why I asked her when she reduced the hours or laid off her employees. Even if they're part-timers, they're potentially still eligible because the federal law changed a lot of this with the CARES Act. And that's part of the problem that some business owners, in all honesty, are facing right now because, in essence, if their employees were making less than $21 an hour, they may be getting paid $21 an hour right now with the federal stimulus money and the state unemployment. So under the Arizona state unemployment, employees are eligible for up to $240 per week. When you add in the federal dollars of $600 a week, which under the DES documents that they're sending out to employees, you have to earn one state dollar, and if you earn one state dollar, you get the 600 federal dollars. So 840 divided by 40 is where I get the $21 an hour that the employees, if they're on unemployment, that's what they're making potentially right now. So that's the first issue I would say is that our employees should all be applying for unemployment. And even if they're 1099s, they should be applying for unemployment because that was the other part of the CARES Act, that it does allow freelancers, contract workers to apply for unemployment benefits in certain situations. Second thing with respect to the PPP, she obviously has applied and is waiting for the money to potentially hit her bank account. Once it hits her account, she's got 8 weeks to spend the money once it's received. As Ellen said earlier, it needs to be on a 75-25 split at least. So 75% of that money needs to be on payroll costs, 25% on non-payroll costs, which typically has been rent, utilities, mortgage interest. Now, there is some debate whether the interest includes other things. The statute is actually defined to be real or personal property. So to me, if you've got equipment that you have a mortgage, like a lease on, then I think that qualifies for forgiveness under the PPP program. And that's my strict interpretation of the regulations. There hasn't been any guidance from the SBA or the Treasury on that. So obviously, Ellen, if you disagree, then by all means pipe in. And then the other thing that's important for Shannon's business is because she did a layoff before April 26th, she has until June 30th to hire back her employees and get her full-time equivalent headcount back to the level it was pre-crisis. So you basically look at February 26th of 2020 as your headcount of what it existed, and you need to get your numbers back to that. There was a guidance issued by the Treasury on Sunday. Surprisingly, the government is actually working on the weekends nowadays. And that guidance basically says that if you are an employer and you ask somebody to come back to work and they refuse to come back because they're making more money on unemployment, then you need to put that in writing that you offered them employment and that they refuse to come back. And if you do so, then that person does not get counted against you from the forgiveness standpoint under the law. The problem, though, however, is you still need to be spending the money, because otherwise you're going to have a surplus of cash in your PPP loan. So what I've been telling employers is don't stress about spending all of the money, because at the end of the day, this is a 1% loan for 2 years with no collateral and no personal guarantee. So you can just treat it as a loan that you can then pay back over 2 years. So that will give you a nice bridge if this crisis lasts longer than we all anticipate.
Thanks, Tim. That really covers it well. And in terms of the loan part, just so you know, we're talking about a 1% loan over 20 years and 6 months before those payments start, 2 years. And 6 months before those payments start. So the SBA is doing a lot in the government in terms of giving you the 6 months to ramp back up. And when you talked about still spending the money, again, if folks are not going to come back, then getting others, hiring, you want to try and go ahead and do that as well. And there are people looking for jobs. Arizona at Work is a great tool to use, resource in terms of looking for employees. And then the one thing I want to be sure everyone is aware of is you can't duplicate, what expenses you haven't covered. So you can't claim it on the EIDL and then claim it on the PPP. You cannot duplicate. And so how they're going to be following up on all that is going to be interesting. But I can tell you that if you use your EIDL because you didn't get your PPP yet, then you need to pay that back. So you want to be sure you're not double dipping. And they're being pretty strict about that. And again, keeping good records of how you're spending that PPP money, and you can pay it back. You can pay it back at any time because interest is accruing. So there's some instructions if anyone wants to contact me in terms of what you should write on your check to make sure it gets applied correctly with your lender. I'll be glad to do so.
One of the issues that I heard from a handful of entrepreneurs over the last few weeks is really about the people part of this, which is one of the key reasons I wanted to make sure that to have Chris on as well, is really, navigating that situation of dealing with each of those employees, especially at a point in time when you've got all of this burden of trying to figure out, is the business closed or is it open or back and forth, and the trepidation of employees that are on unemployment. So Chris, I'm curious from sort of an HR perspective, what's your take on Shannon's situation?
Look, I think the key is communication, and there's lots of confusion. And as we all know, that what's in the back of everybody's mind is, how is life going to go on? We have bills, we have families, we have things. The whole world has come to a screeching halt. And so I think taking the position that any employer is not going to have all of the answers. The only thing we could do is communicate as much as we can, as often as we can, with the right intent. And we've can work together to be creative, to figure out different ways to work from home where that applies. As we think about reentry, I think that's for my company. We have fewer than 500 employees, and we have a pretty big global footprint, even though we're not a huge company. And all of those locations have different reentry protocols and regulations and things that are going on, because it's obviously very complex, because you have the federal, you have the state, you have the local issues. And so coming back to just communicating as much as you can, not being afraid of just letting people you don't know what you don't know, and showing them that you have their best interest in mind. Not only is the right thing to do, but hopefully it buys some of the benefits that as we get back in and we start to re-enter, you got employees that have higher degrees of loyalty because you were there for them, that you've communicated as much as you know along the way, so it builds trust. And it is a good long-term talent strategy, because in the end, not everybody is going to be doing that. And who are these folks going to want to work for when they do come back? And we've had a position of we'd rather over communicate and tell you something that you already know, or possibly even know more about than the company does, than to keep people guessing. And it really comes down to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And right now, the big shift has come to the physiological needs: food, safety, shelter. Those things are in question, which means that people are questioning what the future holds for them. And this is where the leadership of small businesses and entrepreneurs and people that take a position that it's not just about themselves or just their business. And there's lots of great stories and lots of great things that we're seeing out there as a result of this crisis. And so, that's what our position has been, Aaron.
Can I make a couple comments, if you don't mind? I did want to mention I'm doing another series of webinars on resiliency, because I want people prepared for the next step. So if you'd like to know when those are scheduled or have one, let me know. But a big part of that is how we treat our employees and making them feel valuable right now. So I talked about, the salon owner, and they were making videos, and the employees felt valuable. Some people have expertise with the webinar, with the internet and sending messages, focusing and showing your employees, shows your customers that you care about your employees and you care about them. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think it's really important to be thinking about next steps. And we have right now a couple of clarity things on the EIDL loan, the one that was the advance, it was called, up to $10,000. It was allowing $1,000 per employee. Everyone thought it was just the whole $10,000, but it was limited to that. So if you received one of those, there is forgiveness for them. So again, just like the PPP loans, please keep good documentation so you can prove every bit that was used. Again, not duplicating expenses between the two. So those are really meant to help the operating expenses. It was first introduced because the disaster relief loans were taking a long time. There are regular SBA loans that go through a whole SBA process, which is usually a couple of months because it involves collateral. And so since folks really needed money sooner, they came up with the advance loan so that they could hang on until those loans were introduced. So, and then they, again, the EIDLs that are the advance loans up to $10,000, those are forgivable. And again, keep good records on both of them. I just can't stress that enough.
Aaron, just a couple things. A lot of people have been asking some great questions on the right-hand side. So if you don't mind, I'll just run through those real quick. Aaron just talked about the EIDL versus the PPP. It is important to definitely segregate the two. The EIDL loan can be combined into the PPP loan if you haven't applied, but I've been recommending to clients that they do not do that. The reason why is because the EIDL loan is either a 2.75 or 3.75%, depending on whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit business. But that loan for the EIDL is for 30 years, whereas the PPP is a 2-year term. So you might have received, hypothetically, a bunch of money under the EIDL and might want to stretch that repayment over a significant period of time, whereas if you refund it or refi it with the PPP, then you've only got a 2-year window to pay it. But Ellen is exactly right. You need to be using the EIDL money for separate purposes. The $10,000 that is forgiven, that typically is given to you up front. If you applied on April 1st, you should have heard from the SBA on your EIDL loan by now, and you should have received the $10,000 because that gets paid to you upon your application basically being submitted, whether it's accepted or not. So the fact that you haven't heard anything or received that $10,000 to me indicates that the SBA must have lost your application in cyberspace. So I would go back and apply for that, or talk to somebody like Joel who can help hand-hold you through that process. That $10,000 that's forgivable under the EIDL will get subtracted from your PPP forgiveness amount. So if you got a PPP loan for $100,000, then you're going to be eligible for $90,000 of that to be forgiven through your payroll costs. So you need to keep that in mind, that you're not able to double dip on those two things. I'm just trying to run through to see if there's some additional questions.
Can I add just a little bit, Tim, while you're reading those? Conversely to the EIDL loan, the PPP loan, if you've applied like 5 places, people were getting so anxious, and they find you have multiple applications, that can be an issue. So if you have applications open elsewhere and you're ready to get funded with the bank, then I would close those, because if they see your EIN number and they can see that you've applied various places. And I know everyone was getting anxious because the money ran out, and so they started doing that. But some lenders are not funding the PPP loans if there are other open. So if you have a bank that's going to fund you, you've gotten the number, then you need to, I would have to.
So the other question that were asked was related to people being denied unemployment benefits. I've had this happen for a number of my clients because the person that made the comments exactly right. The Department of Economic Security is relying on old rules. For instance, there's a monetary threshold. There's also some prerequisites in terms of you had to be employed for a certain period of time, and there was a waiting period. All of that's being waived. It's just taken the Department of Economic Security some time to catch up. So they've issued on their website some notices to the public that, for instance, PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program that applies to the $600, is going to start running in Arizona on May 12th. So here very quickly. So if your employees were denied for whatever reason, for instance, they were monetarily ineligible or for some other reason, they don't not have to reapply. The department has indicated that they will be processed the week of May 12th. So obviously that's just next week. And what I've been encouraging employers to do is just stay in contact with your employees. And if for whatever reason they're not getting their application processed, then they'll need to just notify you, and then you'll obviously help them any way that you can. Another question that was asked is whether you have to pay that $10,000 advance in the EIDL. The answer is no, you do not have to pay it back. But again, you kind of sort of pay it back because it's going to be subtracted from the PPP loan forgiveness potentially.
I just dropped a glass of water on my laptop. So I think we've got a couple minutes left. Can we run through Lynn's case really quick here? Just see if it brings anything else to the surface. She noted that they applied for PPP immediately, but were not funded until the second round. And so they got the money last Friday. They've got a couple of employees where the unemployment is more attractive than returning to work right now. They've furloughed most of their staff about a month ago, and they're trying to bring them back by next week, and they're still closed to the public. What clarifying questions? Oh, now Lynn says good. What clarifying questions? Let's hit it anyway.
How many employees?
14.
And were they all laid off or furloughed in terms of reduced hours before April 26th?
Just to be clear, while Lynn is responding, the reason I wanted to run through this is the questions that are being asked are going to help everybody else figure out what their situation is. So running through this is helpful to everyone to understand what's important. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
No worries. Do we know if she did the furloughs or layoffs before April 26th? And the reason why I'm asking that question for the audience is the way the statute was written is if you did furloughs or layoffs before April 26th, then you have until June 30th to hire them back without a penalty and still eligible for a full 100% forgiveness on the PPP loan.
And in the meantime, Kevin is asking if employers offer employment to furloughed staff upon receiving a PPP loan and they refuse, is the employer required to give notice to DES? I think that was answered before, which is really document, 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 right?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is the employees are the ones actually filling out their weekly time reports. But you as an employer have a right to reach out to DES and advise that you offered employment and they refused to come back. I know that seems cold or harsh for employers who are trying to be sympathetic and supportive of their work force. And what I've been telling employers is that this is the time for you to stand out and be loyal to your people, because if you do, it's going to make your life better when you come out of this crisis, because it'll make it easier to hire people.
Yeah.
But the good news for the employee/employer relationship is if the employee actually is vulnerable or has underlying health issues that might make it so that they're more vulnerable, if you will, for problems with COVID-19, DES said they're going to take it on a case-by-case basis as to whether their refusal to come back to work is going to still make them eligible for unemployment. On the flip side, with the new guidance that just came out, if you document that you offered it to them and they refuse, that the guidance also says they may not be eligible to continue drawing unemployment benefits. So all you can do is document it, make the offer. That's going to protect you from a forgiveness standpoint. Then you've got to either go hire somebody else on a temporary basis, or potentially hire somebody else at a higher rate of pay until July 31st, when the unemployment benefits expire for your former employee. But at that point, you might have to make a decision to write a notice to the employee that you're treating them as job abandonment because you offered them employment, they're no call, no show, and that you're going to notify DES as you're legally obliged to do. And it sucks to have to be put in that tough situation because we're all trying to be, human about this, but at the same time, you got a business to run, and it's not fair for you to have work that you offer, and some employees take it and others say no.
That segues perfectly into a question that I wanted to ask Chris. From sort of an innovation perspective, if I'm one of the non-essential businesses and I've got to still keep my doors closed, but I'm trying to satisfy this PPP requirement, and I can actually bring back. It's a head count thing that I'm trying to resolve, right? Not necessarily exactly the same people that I have to bring back. And so, how should business leaders thinking about best leveraging their talent for the situation that they're in, right? If I've got a server that's got some social media marketing skills or something like that, how should I be thinking about leveraging folks in maybe areas that they weren't working before?
Yeah, I think that's a great talent management question that basically says, can you what skills are fungible? And I think what we're finding throughout this crisis is that there are a lot more things that are fungible than we may have thought or believed previously, and a lot of it, as we re-enter and we get into the post-COVID phase, it will start to. Is it dry? Did you shake it out? Fantastic. As we get into the post-COVID phase, I think we're all going to have to look at our businesses and the talent infrastructure, the job descriptions, the bona fide occupational qualifications. And so I think leveraging talent that you know of in different ways is certainly a good option. But I also think that, there is a plethora of talent available, ready and willing, and then the question is, are they able to do the work, and what are the parameters by which you set that up so you do get the credit for the PPP? And unfortunately, I don't have very many answers there because we've been in a fortunate situation to not have to take any drastic action to this point. So the borders of my creativity have been limited by my own situation. So I'd like to toss that back up, to the other panel members.
Tim and Ellen, what are you guys seeing with regard to business owners getting creative about how to fulfill those requirements?
So this is one of the questions that Lynn asked too, is speaking about raises and bonuses under the PPP program. I've been advising clients to follow the old adage, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. At the end of the day, there's going to be potential audits. The other thing I've been telling employers right now is if you got this loan and you haven't documented your need for it, you should be doing so right now because of the guidance that we received over the last week or so, which was different than when everybody applied for the loan earlier this month. So previously you just had to certify that you've been negatively impacted by COVID-19 and you needed the PPP money. So, we as a firm have been talking to a lot of clients about that backup documentation. And it's more than we can cover today in this discussion. So feel free to reach out to anybody on my team with respect to that. But to Chris's point, I think you can increase pay potentially. I think you could offer reasonable bonuses, whether you call that hazard pay or something like that. You just need to be careful with any sort of pay increases or rate increases or bonuses because it may get added into their hourly rate of pay, which then means you got to pay them higher overtime if they're working more than 40 hours and they're non-exempt employees. And so you definitely can offer those things. I've had lots of clients ask me about that, especially when you work in the fact that the PPP loan is 2.5 times a regular payroll. They may not have a half time of rent and or utilities that they have to pay. So there's going to be a surplus. But again, the other thing I've been telling clients is don't worry about spending all the money. You can pay it back without a prepayment penalty if you choose, or you can keep it in your bank account and save it for a rainy day if this crisis lasts longer. So you don't need to worry about spending all of this money just because you have it and can.
Right. Yeah, and I think that keeping that in mind and using those funds and being able to pay them back should be part of your financial strategy. And I think a lot of people are going day by day. And this thing about looking forward and putting together some projections for the next few months is really important. So you have all the specifics we've given you today about the various loans and how you've gotten them. Just probably to recap it all, be sure you're documenting everything. Be sure that you're using the funds for the right thing. I agree. I'm hearing a lot, since we're funded by the SBA, get a lot of daily information. And I think there's going to be more auditing than was originally thought. It was basically money out, money in. But because of the first half and some things that happened, I think that things changed from the government standpoint. And there may be, closer looks. So just do everything right, segregate that money, keep track of what you're using it for. And some of our businesses are increasing or giving bonuses, like you're saying, for hazard pay. So that is allowed within reason. And also keeping in mind with that employee going forward, what have I started, and thinking about that. But really sharing the value of your employees right now, I can't stress that enough, because you want to retain them after. It's going to be an interesting time post-crisis as to what people are going to do in terms of their jobs. They're going to be looking elsewhere. At the college, we're preparing for people getting trained more broadly for jobs. So it's going to be a whole different world. So if you just follow the rules, and I know, Tim, we're both big on that, the banker and the attorney. If you just follow the rules, you'll be safe. If you have questions, we're a resource. And I think, Tim, you're sharing our information. So if people have questions that we haven't been able to answer today, we're glad to do that. And for the SBDC, we provide no-cost one-on-one counseling. So thanks to the SBA and Pima Community College.
Great, thanks. Tim and Ellen both provided a little bit of a summary. I was gonna ask you to kind of wrap it up. Chris, any last words from the HR perspective?
I think playing the long game seems like a daunting task at this point. but I think we're all going to get through this, and we're going to learn, and the fight for talent is going to be back on, and this is an opportunity for people, taking words, being good humans, that Tim had mentioned, that happens to be one of our values at Couchbase. Another one is serving your family as defined by you, and we have the ability to decide, and tie the definition of family into our business strategies. And so, as hard as it is to think long term in a crisis situation, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but please do try to do that, because we will get through this.
Yeah, really good reminder that you're not alone in going through this. There's all of us are here together and supporting each other and getting through this. Along those lines of the recommendations of really, pausing, playing the long game, getting strategic about it. The 2 webinars that we did last week were really focused on those topics as well. That was one of the primary lessons that was coming out from the business leaders there was, hey, you got to pause, you got to zoom out, you need to look at the strategy, look at how the world is changing, and be ready for that new world. And you're going to be wrong, but it's better to be moving and driving towards something rather than sitting and waiting. So thank you all so much for spending your time with us today. This has been extremely valuable. I have not seen the chat going crazy like this on these sessions before. We've got so many questions flowing through. So super helpful. And for everybody that's listening and watching, if you want help with any of this, reach out to any of us that are here on the panel. We're all here to help. We can get you connected with somebody who can if we're not the right person. Don't go at it alone, and let's get through this together.
So are you sharing all of our contact information?
I will if you'd like me to.
I think it's a good idea. Cool.
Happy to. I had it linked in the other stuff, but yes, we'll share it. And I think, Ellen, you had some materials, you mentioned a spreadsheet for working through some of this as well. As a tool that was available. So we'll share those tools out to everybody so you can check those out and help you work through these things and keep moving.
Aaron, before we let people go, I know in prior webinars, people have asked if they can get a copy of the recording or the Q&As that were asked, because it's sometimes hard to keep up with it.
Yep.
So if you can make that link available, I think people will probably like that. And I would just tell, if there's still people on the phone, it looks like there's like 67 or so still on. Definitely talk to Ellen first, because she's cheaper than I am, and she's just as qualified as I am. And as much as I want to earn your money, I also appreciate for business owners that are struggling right now, if you can save $1, try to use a resource like Aaron's company. CIC is helping small business owners as Ellen has. So definitely reach out to them first. But if you don't mind paying a legal bill, then by all means, feel free to give me a call.
Yeah, if you guys want to chip in on the bill for Tim for this session, that'd be great. No, I'm kidding. He was kind enough to do it for free. So
I'll refer folks to you, Tim. Definitely. That's the relationship that we have.
Agreed. We're all in this together, and I know it sucks right now, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to be stronger for it. There are a lot of really good resources. My firm's publishing a lot of free information on our COVID-19 resource page. The Tucson Metro Chamber is publishing a lot as well. CIC is doing it, and I always butcher the initials, Small Business Development Council. Is that right, Ellen?
Small Business Development Center.
Dang it.
Got the right letters.
4.
Yeah. So be safe, everybody. Good luck.
Thank you all. See you soon.